all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly, any gain in automation is a gain for everyone. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method.
There is definitely like more building surveillance that do you do
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they did too much content. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's
Zach.
a tough one. I
It's
know,
really hard.
and maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. I am your host, Zach, and joining me as per usual, though he is off camera at the moment, is Dan Platt of the Albany Greens. And tonight we are going to take a look at a bunch more videos that Dan has brought. We're going to start with one in honor of this being the I think the beginning of the Bell Riots in Star Trek mythology. This is supposed to be a one of those catalyzing events in Earth history, according to Star Trek lore, where poor people finally rose up. They were, they kind of hit it pretty close to the head with their prediction that there would be basically tent cities and shanty towns springing up all over the United States. The disparities between rich and poor would be getting worse and worse, wider and wider, and eventually people wouldn't take it anymore and they'll rise up. And that's the part that has yet to come true.
Are you describing the Bell Riots?
Describing the Bell Riots as best I can. So, yeah.
Well, it's yeah. It was police file. There was police brutality, but was something pointed out was that the resolution of what changed the society, particularly American society, I guess, but I guess it's the whole world, was that people just had to hear the stories of the poor.
Right. They were just moved to finally start caring about their fellow man.
I mean, in a way, people do care more about poverty. I think those barriers between. I mean, obviously, you have tribes online, but when you have people sharing their struggles on TikTok or via media, that is so how democratizing it is
Sure.
sort of gauged in are poor people able to access it and use it. And as far as TikTok is concerned, it's because it's a app that really allows you to do all the kinds of media and editing and production that you would normally need a laptop to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can do all of that stuff and make YouTube videos, YouTube style videos.
Yeah.
Javon Bradley, he's able to do a call-in show format on his streams in a way that I've never seen before. Because he's doing TikTok lives. So you basically have all of these conservative TikTok watchers. 2 more month. I can't wait to have my best myself again. He.
Talking about TikTok lives in particular.
Yeah, TikTok lives.
Yeah.
Conservative watchers will be able to hop over onto his live, and he has his like 5 debate topics, and people can just pop in.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
And he's in control, so he can kick them out. So if someone donates to kick someone off, that's sort of like that's the only time he'll hang up. So
I like that. That's fun
to get rid of a particularly childish person.
Yeah.
Speaking of childish people, I'm gonna take a break from Carolyn Poroshenko again. I got a heavy dose of her over the weekend because it's one thing to watch. So the big socialism conference was held again in Chicago. Too bad I didn't go last week, but
Eh.
it's Labor Day weekend. I want to have fun, and I don't
Right?
want to go there when everyone else is going there.
Yeah.
But the anyway, a lot of the talks and the panels and things, it would be things I know. It would be, tread ground for me. Nothing would be interesting.
Sure.
So hey, see it with new eyes. Let's watch a right winger watching the socialism conference because that's what she did all weekend.
Oh my.
Particularly wanting to watch any feminism related panels,
Of course.
and it's, I keep having like it's how to lean into this. Um, she's either play acting or she isn't pretty stupid, and she probably is.
Kind of seems like
It hits.
she's.
It's entertaining until it gets to the point where she, whatever is being said by the speakers is actually going over her head. But like kind of Tim Pool, who's kind of reading an article he also doesn't understand,
Right.
she has to pretend
Has
she
to have a
understands
reaction.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretend that's like, or she's waiting for one of the magic words
Uh huh.
that she's picked up on so she can kind of, she doesn't have to have a big reaction. She actually kind of got into this drone pattern of like, that means capitalism. That means capitalism. That means, because her big epiphany about the left and the woke left is that we're anti-capitalist.
Whoa. Cat's out of the bag.
And so her translating socialists and learn how to speak socialism is really just she picked up on how all of these different terms and concepts we use to critique and describe aspects of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And she picked up on how, like, when we're using these words, we're being anti-capitalist.
Wow.
So she's like, whenever they say these dozens of things, they mean capitalism. When they say transnational feminism, when they say imperialism, when they say colonialism, when they say neoliberalism, they mean capitalism. So it gets really repetitive because that's all her analysis is, and that's all she can really comment on while listening to these talks, because her other messaging is like the left lies about everything. Because they're using these words that mean capitalism
to obscure
to obfuscate
intent,
and confuse.
Oh no.
And aren't you lucky to have me to teach you? Because I'm a teacher.
Right.
And the reason why I know she's a fake teacher is she went a little. She let her. I don't know if she was open about this before, but she let her mask slip and said, like, because she went into that kind of stun lock where her stream was a half an hour of just ranting about how she wants to quit and she doesn't have to do this. And I could go back to corporate trainings. I was making a lot more money doing corporate trainings. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, so so your career, you're just continuing your career as being a fake teacher.
Basically.
Who tells you what, on behalf of the bosses, what's what.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's infuriating because it's a little hate watching because she is really, really fucking stupid, because she'll be listening and she'll read into the opposite of what they're saying, not even because it's a hypothetical, but because she just does not. She gets turned around with what they're talking about. What was it? Oh yeah, but she went through this whole weekend of panels. So she could basically get some kind of grab, because this is where she's a journalist exposing the left. And in one of the talks, particularly like towards the end, someone brought up, I don't know, they were talking about direct action, and someone made a flip, and one of the panelists made a flippant remark about, hey, that book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline? We need to replicate that energy.
Okay.
And she's
this is just
she's
some
aiming on that,
bells
like,
going off, huh? They literally want to blow up pipelines. Okay.
They're doing eco-terrorism. They're replicating that energy means just let's do direct action and
there's do something that makes a difference.
You can mess with pipelines without blowing it up, but like it's interesting that that book, being a work of fiction, and the movie that it's based on, there were a number of voices saying that all of that was psyop. That's all the deep state trying to trick us into doing eco-terrorism.
Oh my.
Pretty ignorant of all of the eco-terrorism that started in the 90s, and it was like the FBI's like big bugaboo. Like they were having trouble handling it. Eventually they did enough funding and enough effort. They were able to disrupt the cells, enough snitches and infiltrators, and if they can't infiltrate, they'll get someone to snitch and inform. It's pretty nasty how how that happens, or why someone within one of these communes, cliques, or anarchist communities
Sure.
just suddenly becomes an FBI informant, like for money. Like, what's their motive? It's so odd.
That is odd.
When I was reading about it in Slingshot, I'm just like dumbfounded. I'm like, well, I guess that OPSEC culture just isn't good, isn't worth a damn, because you're constantly being infiltrated by police.
Yeah, you basically just have to assume that that's always the case.
Yeah. Though it's usually like the infiltrator is the person who wants to do the eco-terrorism. So like I brought this up with an old lefty, and he said like, oh yeah, we were an environmental group I was asking about like, was the machine ever trying to infiltrate your group? I'm like, oh yeah, they had a really bad attempt though. It was a guy who would always like want us to burn something down. So we basically, knowing that he was a plant, we bagged him up, took him by the river, and beat the shit out of him, and he never showed up again. Which shows that they know how to take care of business.
That's right. Yeah.
And a lot of anarchists are actually pussies who don't actually like want to put hands on people they suspect, or they do, but there's such a culture of paranoia of like, are they really a plan? Are they really a snitch? We gotta prove it.
Yeah.
And they never figure it out until it's way too late, or at least as far as the people submitting things to Slingshot. Maybe it's all fan fiction.
You never know with that sort of thing.
It sucks. So there's our intro jibber jab.
Very good.
So I don't know if I've gone through. I bookmarked this a while ago.
Sure.
I don't know if this guy has a lot of other content relating to Star Trek, or and I haven't watched this, so we're doing this blind.
Yeah. Let's do it live.
Be your typical Star Trek economics video.
Don't tell me they don't use money in the 21st century.
Well, we don't.
This has spawned endless arguments over how that works, whether the Federation is communist, and how the repeatedly referenced Federation credit fits into this allegedly moneyless world.
And I'll bet you credits to Navy beans we can put a dent in it.
At least 2 books have been written on the subject, Rick Webb's The Economics of Star Trek and Trekonomics by Manu Sadia. While both books make some good points, I personally prefer Webb's work. It gets more into the issue of how what is depicted on screen might actually work without being completely mired in neoliberal Keynesian assumptions. I mean, Trekonomics actually cites Paul Krugman in the acknowledgments.
Oh, no.
Of course, Star Trek is made up. It's not an empirical case for how to actually organize a society. But it does give us some things to
And you mostly see the economics on a
no money
Navy
is
ship.
high on the list for a lot of people. And for
That is
nerds
also a
on
good
that
point.
list.
Yes, it's military
Because the
vessels.
Federation
The
economy
U.S.
is
Navy ships do have
post-scarcity.
stores on them.
It's not capitalist. No one is
Right.
marketed.
Right, that's a good point. So, yeah, might not be indicative of the wider society for sure either.
But he is going to show the episodes. It's not Homefront. Or, no, it wasn't called Homefront. It was the Paradise Lost.
Oh, okay.
Was the episodes from Deep Space Nine.
Independent because there's no market.
Because you see
manifest
a lot of
state
Earth there.
Oh, okay. So it's one of the best references in the Star Trek universe. Then.
A little bit. I mean, you actually have a double episode that takes place on Earth.
Okay.
In its entirety, instead of just Picard is visiting the family vineyard, or what other instances? I guess there's the Voyager episodes, but again, that's like mostly a Starfleet facility.
Sure.
And you have Barclay at his apartment. And it's just an apartment set.
Yeah, got it.
And martinis on command. But it's not communist either. Private property clearly still exists. Chateau Picard is one glaringly obvious example among many. There is no indication of a planned economy beyond Starfleet shipyards. The Federation isn't just a modern system with starships. It's something qualitatively distinct.
It's market
I say
socialism.
it's effectively post-scarcity because there's clearly limits. Starfleet can't just conjure starships, they have to construct them, implying that there's a point somewhere between stakes and starships where replicators cease to be a viable means of production. It's an energy-based economy. Replicators run on energy, and anything they produce can be measured in terms of how much energy it takes to convert the raw replicator slop into the final product.
So I ate Neelix's food for a week and used my replicator rations.
And at some point, it takes more energy to replicate a thing than it takes to physically build the thing. But that's at the level of public works projects and defense contracts, not the sort of thing that the average citizen has to deal with. At the personal level, it's just like being wealthy enough to not need to work a job you hate. Everyone lives comfortably and has plenty of leisure time. So why does anyone work?
We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity. What does that mean exactly?
More fundamentally,
Can you pause?
what is a job?
So I actually put it. I forget where I was reading this now. God damn it! I'm reading and watching too much. Such a nerd, me. But it was the distinction between an acquisition mindset and a development, not mindset, but in fact mode of production. So, or an economy based on acquisition. Actually, no, because it's not just about economics. It's about entire approach to life. So, the purpose of life is the purpose of a human life. If it's acquisition based, then you know how you acquire knowledge, you acquire skills, you acquire money, you acquire things, you acquire family, friends, and it's acquisition based, like Frankie. Versus development approach, the purpose of humanity is to develop ourselves, develop skills, knowledge, and so on. And what does that affect? It affects the means of doing those things. You know, to acquire is just about getting it and accumulating. Developing wealth is that more of that virtuous cycles of wealth creation that people like about certain means of production.
Sure.
Not just means, mode of production is what I mean. Or in our case, corporatism. So just to repeat, acquisition versus development. And that's sort of represented in Star Trek in a literal way of Ferengi or acquisition based.
And the rules of acquisition, in fact, yes.
Development based.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have rules of development.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also development is a word that social scientists and lefties will use instead of acquiring and any other synonyms for get that money.
Yep. Yeah, good point.
We seek to develop ourselves.
That's right.
And how does society function if too many people don't have one? These were among the issues addressed in 1964 in a document titled The Triple Revolution, signed by a slew of economists, scientists, and other notables who posited that the link between jobs and income was breaking due to 3 simultaneous revolutions in American society. What it called cybernation, which is just increasing automation of production, increasing output while reducing the need for labor. A revolution in weapons, most notably of the nuclear variety, that couldn't be used to win wars, only deter them at great expense. And a revolution in human rights, with equal rights and opportunities for everyone becoming a reality, thereby opening the workforce to more women and minorities, leading them to expect higher living standards with it, while at the same time the need for workers was starting to shrink due to increases in productivity, creating a disconnect between expectations and economic reality. The potential workforce was growing while the demand for labor was shrinking, and you can't even balance it by having a huge army to soak up the excess. The idea bounced around until 1968 when a group of 5 prominent economists...
I forgot they're playing the
which was in
hippies
turn
too, right?
signed by
Yeah.
another 1,000 or so who concurred with the conclusions, And in 1969, President Nixon, of all people, was fully on board with a plan to institute cash assistance for all American families below the poverty line, up to $1,600 a year, which adjusts a bit shy of 14,000 in 2024 inflato bucks. This was seen by some as the first step in addressing the broad problems outlined in the Triple Revolution Report, as well as laying the groundwork for a universal basic income. Of course, there were a lot of people in both the Republican and Democrat parties that thought this would lead to lazy mooches and/or outright communism. Citing a lot of data, both solid and dubious, the Senate made some changes and Nixon was talked out of it, and the plan was mangled into the sort of workfare programs we have today. George McGovern pushed for a more extensive basic income program in his presidential run in 1972, but that went down in flames. And now, with the first quarter of the 21st century almost behind us, it's easy to assume that the Triple Revolution was alarmist and utopian. They thought the robots would bring automated luxury communism. Those wide-eyed liberal fools. But there's another possibility. Perhaps their assessment was at least partially correct, but a different solution has been implemented.
Reports
Because a lot of
usually
the
are half
jobs today
correct.
Are bullshit. An easy way to get to full employment is to take all the unemployed, divide them into two equal groups, and have the first group dig holes, and then the second group fill the holes up. But do they have jobs? They're not doing anything useful. It's all just tedious make work with no benefit to anyone.
Let me tell you something about TPS reports.
And while not quite as obvious, that's what a lot of our economy is today. Make work. We shuffle a lot of paper around. We have a lot of rules and regulations that don't
And somehow it creates value
make anyone
for
safer or
capitalists.
improve the lives of anyone.
Yep.
But they sure keep a lot of people busy complying, enforcing, consulting, and auditing. Large businesses are bloated with unnecessary managers.
I have 8 different bosses right now.
There are entire federal agencies that do nothing but spew forth regulations that keep compliance officers and lawyers busy.
What are you, an anarchist?
If we narrow our definition of employed to include only people that provide a good or service that someone would actually choose to pay.
Oh, those last two clips are from the past tense episodes. With
Past
the Bell
tense
Riots.
episodes. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Good to know.
With Cisco and Bashir.
A significant percentage of our population is effectively unemployed, paid to produce nothing. The illusion of work, says fourth-tier YouTuber talking about Star Trek. So if we hold on to this idea of technology increasing productivity to the point that there just aren't enough real jobs for everyone to have one, and couple it with the idea of Star Trek depicting an energy-based economy for the Federation.
Hey, that's the building from Power Rangers.
Webb gets into this,
Really?
suggesting that there is a sort
Yeah,
of
it's used all the
energy ration
time.
deposit for
Oh, I didn't
Federation
know.
citizens. A
You
kind
go
of
back-
universal basic
Sure.
income.
Maybe you don't. You didn't watch Power Rangers.
You know, it was just
Increasing
I
productivity
did
to the
because
point
my
that there
little
just
brother
aren't enough
or my
real
little
jobs for
sister
everyone
did.
to have one. And coupled
This is
Okay.
this is the Power Rangers building.
All right. Yeah.
This big brutalist thing. Wow.
It's not brutalism. I know.
That's not concrete, really. That looks like concrete to me.
It's a style of concrete construction.
Okay.
It's not brutalist because it has concrete. It's not. It's the type of concrete and it's the texture of the concrete. It's the style.
Okay.
Okay, just because it's still a mid-century modern building, it's still modernist. But if it's like Louis Kahn, it is not brutalist,
Fair
which
enough.
is
I stand
a
corrected.
lot of his work is like this. But no, that's the building that's used. That's the hidden base of the
Like
Power
Rangers
Rangers
headquarters. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's where the I forgot his name now.
Zoltan.
The guy
is
that
it, right?
Zoltan, yeah,
Voltron?
the
No,
Z.
it's not
There's a
Voltron.
Z. That's
Yeah.
Voltron.
Yeah. No. Totally
Wait, like the
different.
robot?
Totally
No,
different
that's
from Power
Voltron.
Rangers.
It was like the Star Trek, the Simpsons joke. It was like, no, that's Bontron. Anyway.
with the idea of Star Trek depicting an energy-based economy for the Federation, it starts to make more sense. Webb gets into this some, suggesting that there is a sort of energy ration deposit for Federation citizens, a kind of universal basic income. Imagine there's some level of welfare benefits in every country, including America. That's easy, that's true. Imagine that as the economy became more efficient and wealthy, the society could afford to give more money in welfare benefits and chooses to do so. Next, imagine that this kept happening until society could afford to give the equivalent of something like 10 million US dollars at current value to every man, woman, and child. Which would mean that the Federation does use money, strictly speaking.
That would
Transactions involving
require a level of
tokenized representation of
profitability
energy
that's
assets.
just mathematically
But the
impossible.
benefit automatically received by every
If it's still
citizen is in
capitalist.
excess of what they actually
So
use
if you're
in
going to have
the
that kind of level of welfare, it would be post-capitalist. The purpose of the economy would be different, or it would be use value or
Sure.
non-capitalistic. I think he's
Like-
gonna gloss over that because I don't think he's coming at this from definitely not a Marxist point of view.
Right.
But that's sort of where this video is good, and then maybe next time I'll find one that is from a Marxist point of view, which I pretty much found. But I think he was actually asking the question of like, is the post-scarcity economy just for like a few? Is it for Starfleet
Everybody,
and for the larger institutions? You know, do you hear? It's just that and maybe this is something the writers of the new Starfleet Academy can dig into, since I think that's going to be taking place on Earth. Then you can have a lot more scenes that are just in San Francisco, and you can see that, like, do people outside of Starfleet mention replicators and how they get around? Do they use transporters? I mean, the movie showed people getting around a station, civilians getting around a station with transporters. So, but they also had trains. So it
depends on what you feel like doing. Huh?
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's like it was by rank or tier or some class difference. Lots of speculation one can do. It's just sometimes just showing off different tech, and trains are cool. Transporters.
Sometimes there's probably one guy in the writers' room. Gotta have trains. I just want to see space trains, please.
Yes.
If a billionaire goes to a 5-star restaurant, he can order whatever he wants. It isn't free, he pays for it, but the cost isn't high enough to give any thought to. At that point, you wave your plastic card and someone brings you steak. It's not as magical as a replicator, but in both instances, the actual workings of the mechanism of exchange happen in the background. The end consumer isn't giving it much thought. And various iterations of this idea of universal basic income keep cycling back around. You might remember Andrew Yang running for president on the issue. For supporters of that, it's a way of not only ending poverty, but of freeing people to pursue work they have some aptitude and passion for, suggesting that we'd still have doctors and engineers, but we'd also have a lot of mediocre artists. Of course, the opponents of UBI have...
Well, no, actually, it's the free capitalists of the burden of having any societal drag. It's like we're going to throw the public... We're going to create a free version of the game of capitalism that, make capitalism free to play with a basic income.
Sure.
And then it can be a guilt-free plutonomy.
Sure. Like, charge whatever wages you want and not have to feel...
Someone was making a video making that point, that the gaming industry is sort of the proto model of what we could be moving towards if such things were implemented. I'm not confident of that in the slightest.
I see.
Because a few rich people mentioning it is not like unless something really, like, in the same way that, like, the donor class only got off their ass to switch the Democratic candidate after the disaster of the Biden-Trump debate. Like, there has to be some kind of jolt or crisis that then gets the ruling class to maybe follow through with that suggestion of the basic income.
Sure.
But it'll be just another gimmicky Band-Aid, because it won't be tied to inflation. It'll be a set amount, and it won't cover everyone's expenses.
Well, yeah, and as Yang conceived of it, it would be in lieu of basically all other social services. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah, in fact, it's a way to assuage, like, yeah, we can have endless speculation and not do anything else about the economy. Um, Meanwhile, you know, opposite is just as unlikely, but needs to be proposed. Um, I was looking into the Sustainable Economy Law Center in Oakland or the Bay Area, and they have a list of policies, and one of them is simply an actual ban on for-profit housing. You know, to be daring and say, no, we can just only nonprofits, limited equity co-ops,
sure.
and individuals should be able to buy residential housing. And below that is then the next step, or the you know the next is an individual can only own one property at a time.
Sure. Yeah.
And what else was there? Basically, you know, something that would end all speculation and decommodify housing in a real way,
Right.
not just in a halfway or maybe we'll get there in 20 years way.
Sure.
But in like this will fundamentally change how the housing market, like, it's still a market, right? It's still, but
Yep.
it is decommodifying
Yeah.
by getting profit making enterprises out of it. And somehow I think maybe locally it is constitutional to do that because it's part of like, well, you can regulate. Well, yeah, that's an open question, I suppose, and that's what this law center is investigating. But if they're able to propose it, they must have looked into California law and saw no way or limited means of that. You know, if a locality maybe using the Euclidean decision. The zoning, you're right. That if a city can determine where you can you can build, then you can also decide who can buy, who can buy and sell. It's not like it's a guaranteed right in the Constitution, as much as the patriots will like to say that it's like that's what this country was founded on, private property rights.
Right. Yeah. Like, could you make that argument that it would be because we supposedly enshrine life, liberty, and property? Is that abridging?
But that's not the wording, though, is
property? I thought that was the wording in the Constitution. It was life, liberty, and property.
Oh, maybe it is. It's not. That's. I mean, the wording is in the Declaration.
Yeah,
but that's
life, liberty,
rhetoric.
Pursuit
And
of happiness,
happiness
in the Declaration. Yeah, that's a little different.
I don't think there's a version of it in the Constitution. Constitution is a law document.
Right.
It's dry
I'll
and
check it
whatnot.
out. All right. Well, let's continue on in the video.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
as
I search for that.
There are concerns that it brings a loss of purpose, that without a job to give them meaning, people will be depressed and destructive. Of course, this argument is usually made by university professors or think tank policy wonks or people engaged in other intellectually stimulating pursuits. I have yet to hear a cashier or a delivery driver say it. It's kind of an elitist argument, and it misses that when working men especially lose a job, there's a sense of shame with it. But it's not the job itself that gave self-worth. It's the societal perception of being useful, responsible, able to provide for a family that comes with steady employment. That's starting to break down now as more and more people follow the rules, work a job, and still can't get by, let alone buy a home or start a family. And of course, some argue that a lot of people would just do nothing. Maybe smoke a bowl and watch Star Trek all day.
I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I finished the book, The Games People Play. And one of the life games is the debtor game. And this is one of the places where the writer or the author is sort of kind of getting his wires crossed sometimes. Because it's like, well, he does say that this is more of a societal level game, and it's not like just two individuals in a family setting or something. But the debtor game is essentially that people take on a debt or mortgage, and that is actually that's the thing that's celebrated in 1950 society. The taking on of a mortgage is what makes you a fully functioning adult, because you have that responsibility and that purpose
Sure.
That purpose, you work to pay off that debt.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do, at least at the time in the 60s, this now made you basically a citizen that can be ignored. The elderly can go fuck off because they're no longer contributing to society, because they don't have debt anymore, and they're not paying. But I guess that what changed in our era is that even the old can just keep refinancing their mortgage and keep going back into that, or taking a second mortgage in their 60s to renovate their home and whatever. And that's because they expect they'll live another 30 years. So taking another 10-year mortgage or something is no big deal. They expect to have that level of income.
Well, and now with medical debt being so prevalent, especially at that last year of life, then all of a sudden seniors are contributing a lot of debt to
right. Yeah. No, the elderly are a big driver in the economy, and that was not the case in the 60s. But I did investigate that the transactional analysis proposed by the book is still in use by therapists, and it's not a dead part. Wasn't a dead end of theory, and it's still pretty legitimate as far as effective tools go, because there was, as late as 2020, there was kind of a review. Maybe it was 2015, but it was that makes it pretty recent in my eyes. Review showing that what was it? 6 times out of 10 it will be positive. The other 4 times just neutral, and there was no instance of it ever having a negative effect. Using transactional analysis of the type that the Burn was doing.
Oh, interesting.
So the games people play, very short, fun kind of book. It's about patterns.
It sounds really cool.
In our behaviors, but it's just like it becomes a game when it becomes it's socially a legitimate process. It's a pattern that's it has acknowledged societal, it's acknowledged socially, but then it has unacknowledged psychological levels, and that's so it's stop playing games. It's we acknowledge that people are doing something like playing the debtor's game, or the game yes or the yes but.
Sure. And
this is a game I think we're always playing playfully, which is well, we could do this strategy, yes, but. But when it's a psychological problem, when there's a psychological issue under it, it comes in the form of someone is asking adult to adult for help. And you give me many suggestions, maybe putting on a parental ego, or maybe just an adult ego. Hey, let's hash out a solution. But I'll continuously say, I can't do that, or I tried that already, or it's just coming up with excuses, or at least reasons that seem on their face.
So many reasons not to do something.
On their face, some reasons, yes, but.
Sure.
But eventually you get exasperated and give up.
Right.
Thus, you have been the loser in this game, because now my problem making me inadequate has now become you being inadequate. And now I'm blameless. Look, hey, I'm just doing my best here. It was you who couldn't help me. At least psychologically, There's Freudianism there, but the ego states are different. Instead of being id, ego, superego, it's parent, adult, child.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
And conflicts occur when ego states are not being complementary in how they're interacting. So if one person is talking, if I'm talking to you like an adult, but then you talk to me, a parent to a child, that's what causes offense.
Condescension, yeah.
So the whole why are people always so offended? It's because there's a mismatch of ego communication. So it's sort of
that makes a lot of sense.
The right winger who's complaining in this way is always going to interact with everyone's a child to their parent ego. and their child ego is just
Yep.
smothered in the back, suppressed, and their adult ego is just like underdeveloped or something, because the adult ego is the neutral, objective, live in the moment. The parental ego is adult, societal or social expectations. So like and he defines jerk as a person who is just all about other people's expectations.
Mm.
And he uses jerk and square interchangeably in the same sentence, and like jerk or square. And so like a square is someone who's just is always thinking about other people's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So like my boss, I want to please him.
Okay.
So I will never be late, or if I'm late, I will rush, or I'll pretend to be out of breath to show that I really did care about being late.
It's the Hank Hill mentality of, we're really doing something here at Strickland Propane, so I'm gonna feed the boss's dog and go the extra mile all the time because he really believes in me and something.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not doing psychoanalysis on Hank Hill or any fictional character, though there are plenty of YouTubers who will.
Fair enough. I just want to mention, I looked it up. The Constitution does in fact mention life, liberty, and property in the 14th Amendment. It says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, but then there's a big caveat, without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So, with that without due process part, maybe you could make the case that
due process is how we, jail and prison a lot of people.
That's
so
true. But like I'm saying, I was just gonna say,
and zoning law is due process because you apply for a permit to build whatever you want. It's actually up to the Board of Zoning Appeals to appeal your proposal or not.
So like enacting that zoning, that could be seen as a taking, but as long as you compensate somehow those private property people who were speculating on whatever property they were sitting on.
Well, here's the thing. We're not taking it, actually. We're only stopping any new buying.
Right, but I mean, taking is very broad and
they're going to see it as taking, just as they see any regulation as taking profits from them.
Right.
And that was ruled by certain courts on a multinational level. But I don't know. I'm not seeing a lot of reporting on the effects of that, or if it maybe didn't go all the way. Maybe it didn't, and it failed in the world.
It'd be good to follow up some
global courts. Yeah, because I had heard of that years. It was 8 years ago or something.
Sure.
Like with the TTP. But maybe. Oh no, that was one of the things where it's like if the TTP goes through, it will allow corporations, multinationals, to sue states that regulate them under the rubric of if they prevent profitability, they could sue them for lost profits. Yeah. But that was only under the TTP. So when that failed, that probably put a stop to that nightmare.
That could be.
It was so important that failed. Yeah. And though it was, I think, reconfigured under the Trump administration.
Oh, surely.
But I think that's what turned that it was twisted into the Trump tariff regime or whatever. Oh. So it was actually like a true inversion of what that was supposed to be.
It's almost like the opposite if you're talking about adding tariffs and stuff rather than
a
free trade.
Right. It's why many sections of the ruling class hate Trump just as much, and will fund the Dems incessantly to it.
What an idiot. Anyway. All right, well, let's move
Protectionism.
On. Yeah, right. Yeah. Such a good track record.
That could well be. But in the context of an increasingly productive and automated economy, an economy characterized by administrative bloat, over-criminalization, and make-work, I think we at least have to ask ourselves if this is necessarily a bad thing. Think of whichever government agency or greedy corporation you find most objectionable for this exercise. Maybe it's the ATF, maybe it's Core Civic, the big private prison company. Whatever tops your shit list. Is it better to pay these people to do nothing or pay them to do harm? While never directly addressed, Star Trek suggests that the Federation chose the former. As a side note to the different social dynamics that would come with such a system, I want to mention the 2006 documentary, Do Communists Have Better Sex? It compared couples from East and West Germany, and while it didn't say this directly, one of my takeaways was that while a man in the capitalist West could get by just by being rich and a good material provider because women were mostly expected to be homemakers, in the communist East, women were equally represented in the labor force and no one was wealthy, so men had to be interesting if they wanted to attract women. I suspect that would be the dynamic in the Federation as well.
Uh-huh.
But obviously we can't just give every American $10 million a year and suddenly we're living in Star Trek. We'd be living in the same America, just with prices that have a lot more zeros at the end. But on a more foundational level, we've seen a mostly steady increase in productivity bring down the cost of goods over the past 200 years.
That's why you cannot just talk about it. This is where this guy's going wrong and why you need some Marxism.
Sure.
He's talking just in terms of wages and prices.
Mm-hmm.
This is on the level of a 1950s Disney-produced, capitalist propaganda cartoon.
Right.
Where it's just prices and wages. And there's no other fucking factors. It's like capital investment. What's the level of capital? What's the exchange rates? What's the rate of interest? What is the purpose of the production? Is it for exchange? Is it for use? Looking only at it's I don't want to be too negative about this guy because he's obviously leaning left.
Sure.
But it's sort of a capitalist realism.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That he's still talking about even the Star Trek utopianism as it's still capital. It must still be capitalism because there are businesses.
Yeah.
And there's
yeah.
and there's private land ownership in the form of family plots. As if that isn't the case in communism.
True.
Because the Picard farm would be what is it?
It could be a commune.
Collectivized.
Sure.
It would be collectivized.
Right.
But it's. I think a pamphlet. I need to maybe make this a pamphlet form of this. That it's about access. So you still have private property even, but it's just that when everything's collectivized, it's just that through economic planning and democracy that you have access to what is yours, right? Because the access is then conditional based on societal rules, regs, and mode of production, right? It's like you have access to all of this and whatever you request, as long as your production to utility ratio is under 1. And that ratio is determined based on true price,
mm-hmm.
which is social, ecological, benefits.
Yeah.
And it's like, how would you measure that? Well, there's tons of ways to measure it.
Sure.
And you can use price structures for that. But true price is, if true price can do it, which I'd love to I'll look into more.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll find a video if it exists.
Mm-hmm.
I wish, I'd like to see the map behind it, but
sure.
Companies doing it, and it shows that you can sell an apple for less actually.
Sure.
Or it's not too much more, just a few cents more.
Yeah. That's negligible amount.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
That trend to its extreme, where manufacturing is so simple and the energy required so cheap that no one is going to spend their entire paycheck before they get the next one, unless they get it in their head to do something crazy like buy their own starship, which I would be totally trying to figure out a way to do. But sometimes situations arise.
You see people in Star Trek do that,
where the available energy and individual needs and
wants. Yeah, there's lots of individuals or ships.
in the Federation space, really.
Yeah, I mean the trope is that they tend to blow up and like they need
Oh.
rescuing,
So
but
this is
but
like,
this is but this, you're only seeing the people in trouble, that have their own ships because they have to get help by a
Gotcha.
a Starfleet vessel. But you don't see all the people zooming around who are just doing fine.
yeah. It's kind of like the Seagate style of personal manufacturing vessels. That was the one that exploded when it took the billionaires
Seagate.
down. Seagate, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
right.
Much closer.
What do you say we blow a week's worth of replicator rations?
In that case, people have to start thinking about how they spend what they have, and the machinery of commerce becomes much more apparent and relevant to them. That's the Federation's
Keep in mind, though,
energy.
he keeps when he mentions rations as like he's used to make his argument that energy is the currency.
Yeah.
That's Voyager, which is an isolated ship with no exterior resources. I mean, they're trading with people along the way, but that's the struggle and the drama of the show.
Right.
That they're doing.
Yeah.
They're the ship of Theseus.
They're
Or the Odyssey, though I forget the name of Odysseus's ship. Did Odysseus's ship had a? Well, I guess the ship of Theseus. I guess the ship of Theseus also doesn't have a name, but it's the ship of Theseus.
Sure.
The ship of Odysseus. Then.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sure they had names for their ships, but they don't survive.
That's true. But the Voyager, they were putting as much energy as possible into getting back home because they were way out in the.
So they had to ration. It's why they even had Neelix there cooking in the first place.
There you go. Yeah.
It's because they weren't because they needed ways of using the replicator less because there's too much energy.
Yeah.
And there was an episode where Janeway was like, there was energy to mine, and it's like there's coffee in that nebula because they couldn't replicate coffee.
Oh, I don't remember that.
And Neelix was trying to make a coffee substitute, which was
not coming out well. Huh?
The humor was that each version was worse than the last.
Yeah, I mean, imagine trying to explain coffee to an alien life form that never tasted it. It's bitter, but I mean,
there's some Star Trek episode where I think something like that occurs, but maybe there needs to be more of it. Maybe Starfleet Academy will have more of it.
There you go.
If that's supposed to be more like the down to earth, like just better interactions.
Yeah. Not the adventuring as much.
Backed non-physical currency coupled with a high level of universal basic income. It's just that the society is so wealthy and the calculations so far in the background that it seems like they don't have a money analog until something goes very wrong. But what's up with this Federation credit we keep hearing about?
My friend, 10 credits apiece is a very reasonable price.
Webb suggests that it could be a private currency to facilitate trade with foreigners. I've suggested that it could be a unit of account only relevant for government spending and foreign trade. The cost of starships is tallied in FedCred. There's an exchange rate with Latinum. It's much more closely tied to actual productive capacity than anything we would recognize as finance. And the only people that ever have to deal with it are people in Starfleet procurement or living on the frontiers in regular contact with other cultures. But how practical is
That's why I started Starfleet Academy. I was really hoping for more of like a Federation colony show. Which there are sci-fi shows that are like a colony, like there's a New Earth show.
Yeah, like Babylon 5 and what was another one?
Babylon 5 isn't a colony.
I mean, they are kind of an independent colony. They're out in space. Eventually they break away from Earth as the government and.
I think of it more as like a Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine, sure.
Show, yeah.
Or,
but obviously the purpose is it's diplomatic. So, I know what you mean though.
Yeah.
But it's like to have a Starfleet franchise, universe, but it's a colony.
Yeah, that'd be interesting for sure.
Because otherwise, you have these other sci-fi shows that just don't have the budget or the writing staff, and so they don't. Yeah. Earth 2, I think one was called.
Okay.
And I can't get 20 minutes into it.
Really?
Mostly because it's just like, because they're like they're CW, because they have like a CW budget type of budget, and the writing is pretty flat.
So
I don't know. It does. I don't know. It doesn't grab me like Star Trek. I guess.
Sure. Fair enough.
Can't just because it's a ship. Wasn't doing anything
count
new.
on having the magical level abilities depicted in Star Trek. 3D printers and tabletop CNC machines can do a lot and are rapidly getting better, but replicators, they are not.
Yeah.
Every method of industrial level energy production we know how to do, and fusion if it ever becomes practical, requires a fair bit of infrastructure that needs to be maintained. The average citizen having more wealth than they can spend seems unlikely. But we might be able to approximate some of Star Trek's not quite post-scarcity, but definitely post-capitalist elements in the not too distant future. There's, broadly speaking, two facets to this kind of economy. On the production side, we can expect our technology to improve in a linear fashion, better and cheaper additive manufacturing, more automation, AI that can handle more of the low-level administrative stuff, but nothing that completely upends the entirety of manufacturing, agriculture, and supply chains like replicators would. In short, increasing productivity and decreasing demand for all but the most specialized skilled labor. The other side is the financial system, which is currently tailor-made to funnel wealth to the already
I haven't
wealthiest
watched
people in
Picard. Hold up, because I haven't watched Picard, but that I guess it's those touches that sort of probably irked watchers like me, where they're transporting the grapes off the vine.
On the replicate with the replicator.
That seems like a lot of energy
Lot of
used for
energy.
something that an obviously robot arm could do.
Right. If they're already out there in the field too, just reach an arm out and snip it off. But looking at that clip though, I didn't see anything that necessarily indicated this was a for-profit venture at all. I mean, this could just be Picard's hobby, his hobby farm. He likes making good wine. He sends it out.
Well, yeah, it's suggested. I don't think
okay.
he was suggesting anything else.
Well, he was using it as an example earlier that there's still for
private property.
Yeah, private property and private business. So.
Well, yeah, that's because he is. I was pushing back against the conflation that communism means no property.
Right. Yeah.
That when we say private property, we are referring to for-profit property.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So maybe we need to make some kind of spiffy word for that term for property for profit.
Yeah.
Property that is held for the sake of profit making and acquisition, not develop it.
Right.
So, Moobleplex.
Good as any, yeah.
For example, newly created money, like the massive stimulus a few years back, goes to banking institutions and large investors first, and they can use it to invest in real assets before the increased money supply drives up inflation at the consumer level. It also allows a soft default on government debt through inflation, at the expense of the working class. The details of currency can have a significant effect on society, and there's a spectrum with gold, an extremely inflexible option on one end.
There's nothing here but worthless gold!
And on the other end is the currently fashionable modern monetary theory, which
I don't get
basically
that,
holds the
but
government
I guess it's just so you can make a joke of the Ferengi.
Yeah,
that latinum is what's valuable. Gold is actually not.
Because
I guess you can replicate gold, I suppose.
Sure.
So latinum apparently is hard to replicate. But the point of latinum is that it's a made-up mineral, right? So
yeah,
I don't know. You just need something. Yeah. Well, that just shows how much better Star Trek writing is. When they make up a something, it's
not so on the nose. Yeah.
It's not stupid. Latinum sounds like some real mineral.
Right, yeah, sure. It could be right there in the chart. One of the ones you didn't memorize as a kid.
Like debt denominated.
Lafian. Well, actually, isn't there like a drug? Laudium. Or is that on the periodic table?
I don't know. I don't know the entire.
I think there was a drug called laudium. So
yeah.
Anyway, its own fiat currency because it can just make more to pay the debt through purchases of treasury bonds and whatnot.
MMT provides an accurate description of how a fiat currency, like the US dollar or the British pound, actually works. It reminds us that we're no longer on a gold standard, so finding the money to pay for the things we need is never an issue for for countries like the US or the UK.
Either of these will lead to problems. Ideally, the money supply should grow at the same rate as the economy, thereby avoiding inflation and deflation. That could be achieved by just making the currency backed by a basket of commodities that represents the real productive capacity of the society using it. This allows it to be adjusted to some extent, unlike gold, but it prevents the government from just creating more money out of nothing.
Yeah, so...
Like tying it to population? That way, if the population ever were to decline or shrink, then it wouldn't crash the currency or the value of things.
That's true. So I read Stephanie Kelton's book, The Deficit Myth, and...
Oh, it did?
Yeah. It's not just simply, the government can just print as much money as it wants. No, she talked about using not just the interest rates, which is the tool that the government uses most, but also the tax rate. So controlling the supply of money at one end and using it for things we want to at the other end to combat inflation. That was
revenues.
Her main point, basically.
You increase the revenue supply, and thus you can have a supply of money.
Yeah, but her main points were like, money is spent into existence. It's not taxed into existence. Of course, like, the government has to make the currency. That should be pretty obvious to everybody. But we always think of it as, where do we get the money from? We got to tax it from somewhere in order to put it into this program and stuff. And she's like, no, that's not the case. It's the other way around. And that, we can spend whatever we want.
We have to run the country like it's a personal bank account.
Right. Yeah.
Like a family at the kitchen table.
Kitchen table, right. Yeah.
Assuming their kitchen table isn't covered with crap.
Yeah.
Like in reality.
Yeah.
Maybe as a politician I should throw that out there. It's like people gather around their clean kitchen table, uncluttered, with junk mail or tchotchkes or whatever the fuck.
Groceries,
homework. Mason jars.
Sure, yeah.
Tupperware from takeout containers.
Right. Yeah.
So you'll get a lot of huns or like, oh, this guy gets it.
Yeah, right.
This guy gets me. Or he's making me feel bad because he's pointing out that I actually am a Slav.
Yeah. Right. That's how you suss out the people that only do takeout from the ones that actually have to clear the table for a home-cooked meal every night.
Mm-hmm.
At least until they do something like add water to the commodities basket and start treating the Earth's oceans as a currency reserve. It's no sillier than the proposal to mint $1 trillion coin to avoid a debt default, a Krugman-endorsed idea, incidentally. But it seems like we need something more for this future Trekish socioeconomic system. Is there a way we can approximate that free money in the background effect without massive transfer payments or high inflation? Maybe there is.
Nationalization.
Bear in mind that this is highly.
I think that's where he's
going. I'm guessing. No, but I'm just
First
throwing
off,
that
it can't just be the government redistributing tax revenue. It's too easy to skew it, to use it coercively, and it's just too bloated and inefficient. But there are other ways to fund a basic income as part of how the currency works, independent of direct government policy. For part of it, we can look at Bitcoin. Currently, new Bitcoin enters circulation through mining. People set up computers that process blockchain transactions, and the one that does all the calculations first gets paid by the creation of new, at this point, fractional Bitcoin.
Wait, is that what he's?
That is what he's saying. It sounds like this seems to be.
No, let's not make the Caitlyn mistake here, right? Okay. Because this is how she gets caught, and I mean, he doesn't see it, but I see how she's getting she sees something being mentioned. It's like, is that what the socialists are for? Holy shit, they're crazy.
I mean,
it's like, no, they're saying that's bad. if they finish the sentence.
Right. Yeah. Let's let him finish the sentence.
But in the example this weekend, they actually were saying it was bad in the sentence. It was very clear what they were saying, but she just interpreted the opposite.
Oh no.
It was kind of like, wow, she is really dense.
Takes some real mental gymnastics to avoid the point.
And her audience, of course, doesn't catch any of it because
they're just well. Yeah. She's trained them too well.
Well, what they are your usual right-wing trolls.
Sure.
but Caitlin has at least trained them to, like, because her usual harping is, we're here to learn, not troll. We're not trolling the left. Stop talking about how stupid they are. We know they're stupid. We all agree. We don't have to chit chat about that. We're here to learn, and that means you listen, which is just so fucking ironic because she doesn't fucking listen to what the socialists are saying at all.
She listens for little.
She's listening for buzzwords.
That she oh, that's what that means.
Yep. It's funny.
All right. Well, let's see if he is taking the same path.
In this case, because Bitcoin has a hard cap of 21 million, both making it inherently deflationary and raising serious questions about how reliable the network will be when there's no longer any mining to be done. But it does show us that the concept of a self-regulating, non-governmental digital currency is possible. So part of our credits, units,
possible but desirable
can be a public infrastructure of computers to manage transactions, but with the proceeds from mining being distributed fractionally across the entire user base. Everyone receiving a tiny fraction of every single transaction in the total economy each day. A trickle of income for everyone. Importantly, this new money goes first to the public, not to the government, banks, or investment firms. It has to cycle through the consumer economy before the state can buy bombs with it. It could also draw some funding from a public goods approach. For example, Alaska's dividend payments paid out to citizens of that state annually from a percentage of the state's oil revenues set aside for that purpose. This could be expanded to all the nature-derived sources of wealth being held.
Oh, we just have to keep extracting
oil, timber, power,
ecological debt.
Solar, nuclear, coal. A percentage of it all feeding into the Ubik pool while still leaving large enough profit potential for industry to exist.
Is this Picard?
Balance this revenue split against current costs and taxes and excessive regulatory hurdles in many cases, and it's not necessarily prohibitive.
I should probably just buy CBS.
We can't simply
I'm sorry, it's Paramount Plus.
Costs on top of
watch the stuff Star Trek I'm missing.
Payments, Social Security, etc. A basic income really only makes sense if it replaces all of those things, making a big chunk of the cost a wash in comparison. The per capita income under this would not be Star Trek levels of independent wealth for all. There will still be a financial incentive to work, even if only part-time.
And you need an ever-expanding economic base. Like, where's the base of the economy? It's still an extraction. It's still an imperialism. You need to account for all of that.
Yeah,
it's very, very theoretical on this level. But just so, like, it's obviously you don't want to get stuck in the weeds by mentioning these things. But it's just like, but all social welfare in the first world depends on the imperialism.
Right.
Now the corporatism. You know, there are different levels of development of capitalism, by the way. So it's something. If I was ever one-to-one with Poroshenko, I would explain that first, I suppose. That's like, look, we use these different words refer to different developments of capitalism, which are working in tandem, or it's cumulative.
Not trying to hide we're not trying to hide the ball or hide our power level or obfuscate anything. It's just different flavors of the same thing.
Yeah. Her last big catch was like a leader in the American Library Association saying libraries are a great place to do socialist organizing. So it's like, see, the leader of the Library Association is a secret communist, and they're organizing people who use libraries.
Wow. How insidious.
Yeah.
All right. Just a couple minutes
working
left.
This out would take a room full of economists and a whole lot of time, followed by trial and mostly error. But there's another aspect to consider. Because we're not talking about an instance.
Stop using this B-roll. It's distracting. My mind can't take it. I have to say the dialogue in my head. Hello, computer. Here, I'll do it with my real mouse. No, you use this. Oh, right. Sorry. Computer.
That's funny.
Would collect Ubics. Infants don't buy anything, so whether through restrictions until legal adulthood, good education and self-restraint in one's youth, or some combination thereof, people can enter adult life with a decent
Or
savings
child
established.
liberation,
That
and
alone
they
could go a
start
long
collecting
way
it
toward
at age
alleviating
7.
the physical
There you
effects
go.
of poverty as well as the mental strain of paycheck-to-paycheck living.
My niece is
The
allowed
end
a
result is
phone.
sort of Star Trek we have at home economy. UBI won't make you wealthy, but no one is dirt poor either, unless they make really bad decisions. And since the money creation...
Oh yes, if
focuses
you
on
make bad
real
decisions, you still deserve to be poor, of course.
Apparently. Can't have an.
Why did he throw that in there? Why did he throw that in there? Is that a utopian worldview? Oh, if people screw up bad enough, they should have less.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
nothing.
No. Yeah. Should
Get out
starve
of
on the
here.
street. Yeah.
economic activity.
There's
It's
still
not
got to be a
inflation,
negative
like the treasury
consequence for
gets
being an
borrowed
addict.
dollars.
Right.
Every unit of UBIC is the result of a real transaction, extracting of wealth from the physical world or the manufacturing of something that somebody actually paid money for. In effect, it's backed by the real economic output of society. There are, of course, potential problems. The real evidence that this will destroy the work ethic and moral fiber of society is usually presented as being far more robust and conclusive than it really is, but maybe not entirely baseless. Of more practical concern is that a system like this requires economic growth. If it contracts, then we have a situation like Voyager's replicator rations, where the allotment falls short of demand. It's not unique to this UBIC approach. Our current economic systems have the same problem when growth slows or stops, but it's more acute when a portion of everyone's income is directly tied to the growth rate of the total economy. Economic contraction isn't a monetary problem. Yeah. It goes much deeper than that.
So he's admitting that it doesn't solve underlying economic tensions then.
I guess so.
Like which cause inequality in the first place. But of course his post-capitalism is not one of egalitarianism, it seems.
No.
But I mean this is definitely one of the this is the steps towards becoming a socialist. Like once you can sort of like get over some of that deprogramming, with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And growing one's imaginary to use a young Ian, I think, term.
I think that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
The ace of spades! The ace of spades!
You're doing it even with the show you haven't seen.
Huh? I don't even know what this is. I mean, it's Picard.
Looks like it's Picard. It's an older...
Yeah. It's older Picard.
A Trekish sort of economy with some level of universal prosperity based on existing or near-term technology, still with a financial incentive to engage in productive work, but without the structural imperative to employ everyone at something, even if it's useless or actively harmful. Not as bubbly and cloy as the Federation, but breaking free of the exploitive market dependency of capitalism without reverting to the oppressive and bloated bureaucracy of state communism has a bubbliness of its own. Maybe it's workable and maybe it's not, but...
It had the virtue of never having been tried.
Which isn't strictly true, but that's a whole other video. And some of the Marxists in the comments who thought I was big rah-rah capitalism guy are so confused right now.
Okay.
Well, I'm not confused at all. I'm pretty sure he's a post-capitalist, and that's why we use that word in Green Party rhetoric and not socialist, though we some of us will.
Started to embrace the eco-socialism, though. So, yeah. Started to embrace the eco-socialism, at least.
Yeah, right. But not officially. It's not in the platform or like official docs. Just in our caucus.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a mishmash.
Sure.
And it's pretty cool. There's another. I guess I'll have to find it. Maybe I'll try. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I may have put it in watch later. Let's see. Since it's not in left field.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me just see if it's here.
Stop sharing for now.
Yeah, you can. Well, you can get the next thing. You can look through for what the next thing.
Sure. Well, I mean, we could always do a video on.
Oh, here he is. It's long, so I'm just showing you what it looks like. The channel name is Literate Machine.
Literate Machine.
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Okay.
And the video name is Star Trek Into Socialism: or Who Deserves the Future.
Okay. Did you want to start it at 24:52, or is that?
No, that's just how far into it I got.
Gotcha.
Because it is long, but he does like show pictures and things. So like, I was like listening to it, but it's like he's mentioning what he's showing, so it's like I have to watch it, even though it's you can see it's mostly just his avatar.
Gotcha.
So yeah, kind of.
All right.
But this is a probably a Marxist. Yeah, this is definitely like a Marxist now talking about Star Trek. But of course, we can never make a 10 to 20 minute video. It has to be an hour.
We got things to say, ground to cover.
Always. Well, the Marxist Project makes shorter videos. But I don't think no one else does. And Peter Coffin makes videos that are bite-sized.
Yeah. There's a few that make the shorter stuff. It's more digestible, but
let's see.
I think What is Politics is another one that comes to mind. It's pretty good.
There was a weird thing. Do you know FD Signifier?
I do, yeah. I generally like him. Mm-hmm.
I like his videos where he's critiquing black capitalists and stuff.
Oh, nice.
But then when he needs like, and he's definitely the educator type of left tuber.
Yeah.
So when he wants to talk strategy or react to current events like the election, he's quite a jumble because he's really just sort of reacting to online leftism. And so it just kind of comes off as like half-baked. Don't have to really cover it.
Okay.
Just mentioning it because it was on my watch later. But I had already listened to it.
Cool. Looks like we have
basically you had white leftists like us online who were making memes or critiquing people who are all like doing the Obama praise all over again, but for Kamala. And so like making memes about Cop Mala, or are you really still gonna like vote Democrat just because they swapped out the face? But it's a black face, so it's like suddenly it's a black face in a high place. But critiquing that in the wrong tone is still really wrong and frustrating because as he said, like, if you critiqued Obama, I would have told you, even if you were nice about it, I would have told you to get out, like, get the fuck away from me. Because, like, there was nothing you could say that would make me think that Obama was, like, not actually, like, a good thing.
Sure.
As president.
Makes sense.
What am I doing? Yeah, so let's get back to...
You want this next Star Trek one?
No. Well, unless you want to get started with it, but it's an hour.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we should say that.
Even if we don't pause, we don't have enough time.
We could watch a video on the history of Labor Day.
I'm sorry. You're sharing my screen?
No.
No. Okay.
You sent me the link, so that's on my screen.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to the left field playlist, and then pick something.
Sure. Project 2025.
That's the Peter Coffin video.
Don't know.
He then made a video that disgusted me right afterwards, where he was actually critiquing the company that uses True Price to sell chocolate. He was basically calling them out as being hypocrites because they're like, there was
for profit, or
well, there was an org that was listing companies that can't prove they don't have slavery in their supply chain.
Okay.
And they were included. But then I need to ask, like, well, this org that you're citing, like, who are they? And what are they doing? Like, what's their standard for saying that someone can't prove but Mr. Beast chocolate is slavery free. That's what he's comparing it to. It's anyway. Peter Coffin's a weird guy, and it's never quite clear if you can believe him what he's saying or not.
Yeah.
But I saved it just because I agreed with the messaging that like fear mongering about the powerful Republicans, because even when the Democrats are hegemonic, they're still really weak, and when the Republicans win, they're mad that they're not hegemonic, and the Democrats are mad that they're hegemonic, but they don't feel like they're winners.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that's the duality. Republicans can win, but they're not hegemonic, and they're mad about it. Democrats can be hegemonic, but they don't usually win, or they're not winning policy-wise, so they're mad about that.
Interesting. That does sound good.
One Dime Video.
Yeah, you've been talking about One Dime a lot lately, so maybe we should check that out.
This is the first one I bookmarked, actually.
Cool. So this is the separation of powers is broken. Here's why.
The last thing before we go tonight, protecting our democracy.
Our democratic institutions threatened like
we have to
before.
defend our democratic institutions against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
We cannot take our democratic institutions for granted. What is at stake in all of this is nothing less than our democracy.
And we will protect our democracy.
And they are saying this over and over and over. It's why I can't watch C-SPAN
Sacred
anymore.
component of the United States system of.
It's all they ever fucking say.
Really?
Which is considered to be one of the most democratic features of American democracy. Though in recent times, the Supreme Court has come under fire for the Roe v. Wade decision that allowed states to outlaw abortion and contraception. The U.S. Supreme Court has also recently rejected President Joe Biden's extremely moderate climate change policies to regulate emissions, and they also struck down his very modest plan to relieve student debt. Why does the Supreme Court, a supposed bastion of U.S. democracy, frequently go against the will of the majority of Americans? Is it just because the Republicans under Donald Trump stacked the Supreme Court with ultra-conservative judges? Well, yes, but the problem runs much deeper. What if I told you that the US Supreme Court was designed to be a check against democracy from the very start? And not only that, the even bigger pill to swallow is that the United States system of checks and balances as a whole is structured to be undemocratic.
Is it mirrored? Yes, it is. Okay. Wait, is it mirrored? Yes, it is.
Now, some of what I'm about to show you in this video is already fairly well known by many critical historians. But some of what you're going to hear in this video is fairly unknown to most people, especially Americans. Now, for starters, it's worth considering the class interests and openly anti-democratic sentiments of the American system's founding architects, which should at the very least make you a little bit skeptical of the system they designed. The framers of the US Constitution made no secret of the fact that the American political system was designed to divide and conquer the working majority. James Madison, key architect of the US Constitution, literally called it divide et impera. In the Federalist Papers, Madison was quite explicit that the US electoral system was deliberately structured to preserve the spirit and form of popular government, but to take away its substance so that a, quote, unjust and interested majority could not, quote, discover their own strength and act in unison with each other, and invade the rights and freedoms of the propertied classes. This method of dividing and conquering the population has been well documented by historians, but it is rarely emphasized just how much the decentralization of political power can
Founding father
serve an
myth is
undemocratic
very
function.
strong.
Oh, God, yes.
That everything good we hold dear is because of their machinations.
Right.
And it's
wise,
definitely
divine men.
It's fortunate that, I guess, in sound bites, that, you know, us anti-Americans, when we criticize the founding fathers, it's, well, when we maybe it's the fault of identity politics first, is that it's like you do it along racial lines with slavery and whatnot, but not the wonky reasons of, well, they're actually I mean, we'll mention they're aristocrats, but sort of glaze over that article we read, you know, or the sources that this guy, that One Dime mentions, that talk about how they set up all our institutions to be anti-populist and anti-majoritarian. I mean, hell, the fact that only people with property could vote in the first place.
Yep. And men with property at that. Yes.
But they sort of figure that over time, more and more people would own property, or maybe they'd acquire it through means, and because they were, out to make it adaptable as well.
Yeah, and there's plenty of land out there to expand and exploit and take from other people.
But whenever I mention, well, actually, it's usually a remark. This just happened. I always regret it, but maybe I don't. But fear mongering about Republicans don't even believe in the Constitution anymore. I'm like, well, neither do I. I want a new one. Yes. And of course, the conservative reply is like, careful what you wish for. Oh, you won't like what you get. Oh, the right would dominate that.
Yeah, okay, bud. Oh, they have such
only because they don't want to change anything, apparently, which shows their apathy. And
yeah, they got it good,
when it comes down to it,
or at least they know that their enemies have it bad, so they wouldn't change a thing.
And in this case, this is a guy who's like a master sign maker. He's got a sign making business.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, he's a good guy generally, but like a bulwark, but community leader, but just annoying. And they're like pretty conservative, actually, at the same time. Dangers of being old, but also comfortable. I don't know. You can be old and comfortable, but be radical.
True. You can.
Oh, the loading?
Yeah, I don't know why.
But yeah, there's the racial component. That it was at not the same time, but it was before.
When it comes to the undemocratic nature of the United States and other countries, most people solely focus on the concentration of unaccountable power in the hands of the central government, especially within the national security agencies. Okay, unless you're already in the know, prepare to have your brain explode. The separation of powers, widely seen as one of the most democratic features of US democracy, is actually one of the system's most undemocratic features. Decentralization is typically assumed to go hand in hand with democracy, and the separation of powers sounds like quite an appealing concept, even to those on the left, as it coincides with the common sense notion that power corrupts. According to most mainstream conceptions of
it's Republican. It's Republicanism. And in the Renaissance, I mean, that was radical shit.
Sure.
But that was when
kings.
That was 500 years. That was 500 fucking years ago.
Right.
So
yeah, monarchs were the unitary government. So
and the economy was feudalist,
right.
Unless you were in a city-state like Florence.
Sure. But
even then, you had families that were like, "Let's make ourselves the duke and the monarch, or the city monarch."
For sure.
The separation of powers is to prevent a monarch, dictatorship, abuse of power, or the tyranny of one faction. But in reality, the main tyrant that the US founders of the Constitution were trying to protect against was none other than their own people, or as James Madison called them, the quote, tyranny of the majority.
Oh, God,
Contrary to the famous dictum of we the people, the real function of the separation of powers is the separation of the people.
I will clarify, though, that as far as speaking of factions, this was the mindset and the philosophy of the Federalists.
Sure.
So the anti-federalists, the Jeffersonians, were more populist and and revolutionary because they had more empathy and solidarity with the French Revolution, and the Federalists didn't. So the Federalists this was the mindset of the Federalists, but the anti-Federalists were anti that. They were still landowners and aristocrats, or they were less aristocratic. They were more like, well, my farming constituency is on my back, and obviously their interests aren't served by what the Federalists want, which is serve capital, essentially.
Sure.
And the next stage of capitalism, which is free trade, imperialism.
Democracy is supposed to be about power to the people. But the separation of powers in practice actually takes power away from the people. Far from preventing the tyranny of any unaccountable state authoritarianism, we know that doesn't work, or the protection of minorities, unless you're talking about the rich, The actual function of the US separation of powers is to limit political democracy to a propertied minority, while preventing economic democracy for the propertyless majority. Far from being
makes absolute sense. Like, very few parts of that government that you actually are able to elect. So you got the president, who appoints a whole ton of people, however he feels.
I mean, so much of the government's appointed.
Yeah, right. And then you have Congress.
Even the these ad hoc volunteer, they're not always ad hoc, but these volunteer committees that my city has, and I just applied to 3 of them. But yeah, 3. They're appointed. Now, some seats are appointed by the council and some are appointed by the mayor, but you still have to basically get you apply with basically the same way you apply for any job, letter and resume.
Sure.
And those are reviewed, and then they pick who they appoint. Now, this is probably like a little more sensible than having an election for these committees, because the library board is also volunteer, but I had to stand for election for that.
Sure.
And in the same way, these committees could probably have maybe 12 or maybe 24 applicants. You usually don't have a dozen applicants for elected boards, but this year we did. Because I think the library board, there's definitely more money involved, but the sort of responsibilities could be equal to some of these other volunteer committees. So not so much the Human Rights Commission, because that just like reviews human rights complaints that are made, which is there even 2 of these a year? I don't know.
Yeah.
The other one I applied to was the oversight board for our public access channel and the flag redesign committee. The sustainability committee was also up, and I probably really should have applied to that, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to be shoehorned as an environmental guy, actually, even as a green. It's like I actually want to be in another area to show that a green is more than just for environmental issues.
That makes sense.
And that the sustainability committee, being quite large, has subcommittees which I think anyone can just help with. I've been told this a few times. So it's like, well, if I really want to get involved with that section of things, I can pretty much just call up the people I know who are actually on the sustainability committee. Like, they're people of my mindset there already. I think maybe that's also part of it. Like, the right people are already there. It's not like a bunch of bozos wasting time. But these other committees, it is a bunch of climbers. So I think I want to have my shot to apply to that, so it isn't just a bunch of climbers.
Sure.
Or something like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Oh, okay. Let's get back into it. But yeah, he's making a good case so far that you're not electing most of the government, you're not electing the Supreme Court at all. So yeah.
Or the agencies, and that like progressives like Warren and Bernie Kratz are like, well, we've learned that policy is personnel. So if we just have enough of our people, Bernie Kratz, in appointed positions, then they have the ability to do the policies we want. So we don't even need to win elections. I think that's really like long term's bad. But maybe I'm being cynical, but but the whole like the policies and the personnel, because there's an acknowledgement that in the way government currently works, because it's entirely unaccountable to any popular will, is that whether or not a policy is effectively implemented is based on who is in the bureaucracy, and sort of the tyranny of the bureaucrats. Or that you can have bureaucrats hold things up, or just not, or like they just do the bare minimum. And so, since they don't make waves or change any, ruffle any feathers, that's good for politicians. But if they point, someone who say, because like when progressive lists the accomplishments of the Biden administration, they'll be mentioning what the FCC not the FCC, the FEC director. Oh, they're blocking some mergers. Like, there's always some mergers being blocked, every cycle. In the 2010s, like there were these kinds of victories of blocking mergers and things like that. And then they'd allow other mergers like the Spectrum Comcast, and things like that.
Yeah.
It's why we only have 5 telecoms or this many. It's like all of that was already done.
Basically only
so
two
like
in my market.
and the argument is like the progressive FEC person will undo some of this. But how long will it take? Bureaucrats work at the speed of bureaucracy. That means they do one good thing a year versus the million transactions occurring in the capitalist economy.
Sure.
What the capitalists are doing, it's a matter of like who's really running the show, and changing out some bureaucrats is still tinkering around the edges. It's like thinking about how we remember Teddy Roosevelt as the trust buster. Sure. It was a thing about Taft, how Teddy with his great he got the ball rolling and he took on the trusts and the monopolies first, but he only busted maybe 10 of them.
Right, yeah.
Taft busted 40. He spent the whole presidency doing continuing that policy. Did he get credit for it? No. It was maybe it was hysteria talking about this. It's like, oh, he was more than just a fat guy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The joke was that they couldn't list anything else he was doing, but at the time, I think I was reading in my middle school history textbook that it was mentioning that Taft actually did more more trust busting, because by then the law and the precedent was set,
right?
So you could just continue.
Continue on the process. Sure, makes sense.
Anyway, let's keep going.
Continuing on.
Being a government built on the meaningful consent of the governed, the American system of checks and balances makes it practically impossible for the demands of most citizens to be implemented without the consent of at least a significant portion of a ruling class minority. The undemocratic functions and origins of each branch of government, and that includes the presidency, the Supreme Court, the Senate, and even Congress, are described in detail throughout the book titled We the Elites: How the U.S. Constitution Serves a Few, by Roby Ch. I highly recommend giving it a read. Within America's matrix of political judicial institutions, for the demands of regular citizens to be implemented, policy proposals must somehow pass through the House, the Senate, where most bills famously go to die, and avoid a presidential veto, and avoid being struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Not to mention the fact that most members of Congress, senators, Supreme Court justices, and the executive branch are heavily influenced by their corporate donors and policy advisors, who often have corporate ties and or have been groomed in elite institutions and fed ruling class ideology. If you want a really good book that proves this in great detail, I would highly recommend the sociologist G. William Domhoff's Who Rules America. And the dominant classes and wealthiest elites of society do not need to be united to have their way with the U.S. government. The elite minority
Can you
needs
go
only
back
win
so
once
we
in
can
this
read? I
process
want
to
to read the
prevent change and
subtitle of that.
maintain the
For that book. There. No, forward. Forward. There. The corporate rich, white nationalist Republicans, and inclusionary Democrats in the 2020s. Okay. Oh, so this is recent.
Who rules America? Okay, yeah. Updated 2023.
William Domhoff's Who Rules America. And the dominant classes and wealthiest elites of society do not need to be united to have their way with the U.S. government. The elite minority needs to only win once in this process to prevent change and maintain the status quo. As a result, even the most watered-down compromises not favored by the corporate rich have been prevented from being passed. And there are many examples of policies that have a lot of popular support being blocked by just a tiny section of the US government. A contemporary example is how the fossil fuel industry was able to subvert Joe Biden's climate change policies by lobbying and funding Senator Joe Manchin, who was able to single-handedly block Joe Biden's Build Back Better legislation. Far too many liberals, conservatives, and even leftists place blame on individual politicians and their partisan affiliations rather than the system itself, each of them claiming to uphold the Constitution and paying fidelity to America's democratic institutions. Now,
have you
would
seen
think that
how
a system
AOC
that is
has
so
been left
deeply
bashing?
undemocratic would undergo major
Sorry, I missed what you said there.
Have you seen how AOC has been left bashing because activists have dared question her and grill her?
That's been so disappointing to see. I mean, I guess
hold
that's been her
her accountable.
trajectory, but yeah.
I think it was there from the beginning. I was pretty perceptive at the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
Because it was from the get-go, like, I was just like, the first year she's in Congress, it's like, the cover is like, well, she just got there. How could she accomplish anything? I'm like, but she's also not accomplishing anything. Like, but she's accomplishing nothing with style. You know, she's accomplishing nothing while selling that she's doing a lot. So I think it was the dishonesty that she's like, I'm actually really socialist, guys. And I'm really pushing the envelope with how progressive I am.
Mm-hmm.
When I was just seeing a younger Elizabeth Warren. And yeah, that's why a lot of Bernie crats kind of would hold Warren up at the same level, but not anti-capitalist and not radical in strategy as far as challenging the duopoly leadership, because, well, hey, you've joined them. You're complicit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she has to repeat duopoly talking points about independent politics.
Yep. How
we're not serious
Jill
because
Stein
we haven't. We're
arises
predatory.
every 4 years.
Which is something. Yeah, there was someone similar. I think
books. Yeah.
It wasn't. Yeah, sell books. It wasn't. Wasn't Noam Chomsky, but it was someone like him that did the same meme about, like, well, we're obviously not. We can't run to win. So why are we running? We must be running with nefarious or ulterior motives.
Right.
And that's a conspiratorial thinking that I thought that left liberals would like the line.
I see it more and more lately, talking about how Jill Stein is a Russian asset or an op because she sat at the same table with Putin and some of his advisors one time. That just proves it all.
Fuck that they still mention that.
Yeah, like.
But hey,
sure, world leaders meet each other. There's pictures.
If the lie sticks, I mean, they're not saying she's anti-vax anymore, but I'm sure if it wasn't that, it would be something. They would be using that.
They'll use anything they can.
Because there was a month where that was sticking. It's just that's where I got really bummed out about, like, the online left and progressives, because they were going along with that lie that she was anti-vax.
Right.
And they're using as evidence that she's, like, anti-science, because she's like, well, we do need to study the effects of 5G networks on kids, because there are some effects that are being observed.
Sure.
I think it was in Slingshot, and again, mileage may vary because it's all self-reporting. But there was a guy in Slingshot magazine. This is the Anarchist newspaper, by the way. So fact-checking be damned. Fact-checking is a authoritarian spook, statist spook.
There you go.
So anyway, the guy was claiming that, like, he lived next to a 5G tower and it vibrated his goddamn body and made him, like, violently sick. And if he had lived there too long, he would have killed him. Backed up by his doctors.
Backed up by his doctors, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
He wasn't saying it was like literally scrambling his brain, but just like the waves were
affecting.
They were lethal, sublethal doses of radiation being put out.
Sure. So like just saying, hey, that's kind of weird. We should probably study that. I guess that all the evidence you need to call her a science denier.
Even though she was literally sticking to the principles of science and medicine, which is the precautionary.
Hey,
principle.
That's weird. Let's inquire more about it.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, it's just the really angry undercurrent that I see in so many leftists who, if you even talk about third-party politics at all, just you can feel it behind their comments online. It's really bothersome.
It's odd that I think you had a lot of Nader voters who were convinced by Democratic Party propaganda that it was their fault that Bush won.
Yeah.
I just saw it again in another video about like ranked choice voting, but it was using the spoiler effect like argument for why like as a problem to be overcome. And so it's at that level where it's like there's almost like no point in fighting it. It's just so taken as fact that even like back then and now, I'll still come across, at least online, so maybe they're trolls, but people who say, I voted for Nader and never again.
Yeah.
And that's, or they say it as a credential of like why they're friendly to the Greens. Well, I voted for Nader in 2000.
I believed in their
like,
cause.
What were you doing the last 20 years?
Yeah, right.
But what were you doing then? What were you doing? Like, because it was a lark. Voting is just a thing they do once every 4 years.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like I'm meant to care when they say like it's when they say it like a flex.
Yeah.
That's annoying. That's what annoys me. Like they're trying to like they're showing that they're friendly or something like that, and it's like actually no,
they have the
friendly
right politics. But
when you say you vote for Howie in 2020, then you've impressed me. Then you've shown you're a friend of mine. That's my standard of friendliness, I think, to independent politics.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Not voting for Nader in 2000.
But yeah,
because that's a lifetime ago as far as Zoomers are concerned.
Oh, I mean, literally more than their lifetime ago. So
yeah.
But yeah, just a quick mention. Like every time they talk about this spoiler effect, it's they talk about with Gore. It was not a spoiler effect. It was Gore who gave in to the fucking Brooks Brothers riots, and just allowed the judges to throw out ballots. It had nothing to do with Nader.
Yeah. It's the games people play. I mean, one game is look at what you made me do.
Right.
Another game is, if it weren't for you. There's the social level where it's just voting, but then there's the psychological level where people like there's this guilt that you're convinced that it was your fault or you're guilty because Bush is so bad in 9/11. And 9/11 like destroyed. There were no strikes after 9/11, and the fact that like the strike wave that we've had in the last 4 years is just getting back to the levels of strikes in the 90s. But that was after 20 years of unions being destroyed,
being dismantled completely.
Because when the bar graph of how many strikes there used to be. Versus, and then in 1980, it nosedived down to here and 1%. And then it then goes to 0 after 9/11, and now it's back up to 1%. Wow. And I'm like, wow, labor's coming back.
Well, hey,
I am not
gotta take our
optimistic about that.
Where we can, but
I guess, but it's not a strategy for the future. Because it's even at the rate of unionization, there's not enough unionizing happening, and it's just so slow.
It needs to pick up steam.
And I don't even think it's a matter of I'll be a little cynical. I'm not seeing how it's gonna like pick up steam. The laws have to change, and the labor unions with their money spent the last 40 years gunning for reform. It's why they were all about giving money to the Democrats. So they would pass card check and the pro-union laws, which just they're the first things that are dropped on every legislative agenda. It's just non-starter. Obama dropped it. Biden has dropped it. It's always dropped, and they're not even pushed by AOC or the squad. It's a burn even. It's just not on the agenda as far as the leadership goes. And so they've been putting more money into financial assets. I'm talking about the major unions.
Yeah.
They're not pouring it into unionization, which I'm not sure why they don't explain this, but they're not allowed to. So they make themselves like it's like they want to look like they don't give a shit. But I think that's why they have to say we have to change the laws, and that includes the laws that limit what we can spend due money on. Because the law basically says we have to spend it on ourselves. We don't want to have to live in the life of luxury when we go on these conference holidays, but the Supreme Court ruling in 1949 means that we can't spend our money on organizing in other sectors.
This is crazy.
That's why any new unionization is completely grassroots.
Yeah.
And maybe their political wing will maybe give a few $100 donation, or they'll use money to throw a picnic, and then the new unionizing people will be partnered with it, so they don't have to pay for some social event. So maybe that's how they're helping, and that's what I see. Anyway, I went on a pretty negative tangent. It's what I'm thinking about because I watched, who was it? Maybe it was One Dime as well. Kind of going about, someone was talking about just how it was Bad Faith, I think. It was a Bad Faith podcast. Sure. Like she's kind of on like a negativity arc.
Is that still Brianna Greyjoy? Is she at the helm of that? Okay.
Brianna Joy Gray.
Is it Joy Gray?
Yeah.
I said Greyjoy like the that was Game of Thrones. God, I'm an idiot.
Yeah. And when the Democrats talk about joy, I think about the Happy Happy Joy Joy song. Though the Chapo Boys mentioned, one of them mentioned that there's the video game which flopped, but it was We Happy Few, where the dystopian residents take a drug.
I saw a video on that. Yeah,
a drug called joy.
Yeah.
Take your joy.
Right. But yeah, Happy
Joy. They all
Joy.
have Joker faces.
That's so good for that, because so many leftists now are just having to put on that happy face and be like, oh, it's okay that she mentioned she wants the most lethal military in history. It's okay that she's throwing all these policies under the bus and talking about building a border wall. It's just keep going, guys.
It's great. We're not scaring off the moderates. We're not scaring off the pro-military, but I want better working conditions people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the right messaging. It's the messaging progressives wanted all along.
Oh, man.
Anti-imperialism is a losing. It's a loser's game.
Apparently.
Form. Yet the insurmountable threshold needed to change the U.S. Constitution makes the prospect of radical systemic change nearly impossible. Any proposal to change the U.S. Constitution must achieve 2/3 support in the Senate and House of Representatives, and must get 3/4 approval from the states. Despite over 11,000 attempts to amend the U.S. Constitution over the past 2 centuries, the Constitution has only been amended during this time a mere 27 times. 27 times in about 230 years. That means that.
Well, the problem with that number is that it's hard to memorize all of them once you get above 12.
That's true.
You get when I was learning them, I was trying to learn all the Bill of Rights, and once you get above 10, it's like, well, what's 16 again? What's 14?
Right.
Then you get 19's women's vote.
Right.
And if you ask people, what's the 25th Amendment?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. So yeah.
They couldn't even tell you the 8th Amendment.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That definitely is the problem.
I don't think I was ever tested
Changing
on
the
it.
U.S.
I just
Constitution
wanted
has
to
had
know.
a success rate
Well,
of
I'm teaching my kids the U.S. Constitution this semester, so maybe I should test them on all the amendments just to be that teacher.
Well, not a pop quiz, but just like you could start actually the year like an art teacher does. Just a piece of paper and list all the ones you know. You don't even have to number them. Just like what rights do you know that we have?
That's a good idea, actually.
And then at the end of the class, have them do it again.
Yeah.
I see. Now you know so much more.
That's a
Now
good
you know
idea.
your rights.
I think I'll probably do that.
Or you could hold like some kind of snap poll election with the choices being different, like political ideologies, like or identities, and then have them do it again at the end of the year and see if it changes.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna have them all run for president, so they're gonna have to come up with their own party and platform and stuff like that. So I'm gonna have them actually look at different party platforms and see which ones they agree with, see which ones that don't make sense to them, and at least they'll know about stuff that's out there. That's the idea. So
it's a good project then. Wish it was assigned to me and pig.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What's your semester called? Is it called what is it?
U.S. government. So we're starting with the election. Usually it's taught the other way around, where they go through the 3 branches of government, and this is how a bill becomes a law and all that junk. But I'm pushing that to quarter 2 because I want them to be excited for learning more about politics and political parties and campaigning and all that stuff. So, well, that's
because that's actually is what comes first, and then the lawmaking and the governing happens after.
For sure. Yeah. So get to see how all that ideology ends up playing out.
0.0245%. The U.S. Constitution is the oldest constitution still in effect, and has not seen a single major change in the past 3 decades. I mean, even Thomas Jefferson thought the Constitution should change every 40 years. U.S. politicians zealously invoke
but he was an anti-federalist.
Biblical scripture. The near impossibility of reforming the U.S. Constitution is further ensured by the Supreme Court, which is arguably the most undemocratic obstacle to systemic change in the United States. The Supreme Court can single-handedly strike down or roll back legislation that it deems to be in conflict with
somebody didn't use AI to Photoshop the court,
or even if it managed to pass through the House and Senate. The Supreme Court is in many ways kind of like a judicial aristocracy. Supreme Court justices are appointed by the president rather than being elected by the people, and they are virtually unaccountable to the public. They also have life tenure, meaning that they get to serve until they're dead. And they can be removed from office only for misconduct through impeachment by the House and conviction.
And something added to the Green Party platform this year is ethics reform for the Supreme Court.
So
to have a independent board that can basically review their ethical standards, because currently none exist, and it's been decided that they don't have to hold themselves to any ethical standards.
Apparently so. They can just accept unlimited vacations, which are totally not bribes.
There's actually no rules against them doing so. There's no. They said we don't actually have ethics rules.
Yeah.
So
gotta love
instead of just
checks and balances,
instead of expanding the court or stacking the court, we added to our platform an ethics board. Platform.
Makes sense.
Thirds vote after a trial in the Senate. In the 2021 version of his classic book, Who Rules America, G. William Domhoff calls the U.S. Supreme Court a bastion of corporate dominance, the ultimate protector of the interests of the corporate community. Seriously, I highly recommend picking up this book, or at least checking out his lectures on YouTube. They're really interesting and very accessible.
It is a real system
Throughout
of
most of its
economics.
history, the Supreme Court's members have came mainly from backgrounds in corporate law and have more often than not made decisions favorable to corporate power and against the rights of labor unions. In fact, it has been well documented that Supreme Court justices have issued hundreds of decisions involving corporations in which they own stock. I'm not kidding. Supreme Court justices literally being in charge of cases involving companies which they literally have stock in.
Wow.
Talk about a conflict of interest.
No.
Despite all this, many hopeful left-leaning Americans still believe that, although deeply flawed, the U.S. political system still allows the possibility for a democratic socialist to attain the presidency and implement their policies designed to serve the working majority. While
Yeah, there's
weakening
this
the
kind of
corporate rich.
not a slippery slope fallacy, but it's the fallacy where, like, if you think something is wrong and you want to change it, it must mean you want something worse. Or if the fallacy is that this assumption of if we were to ever change our American system, it would thus be worse.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's a huge right-wing talking point. Yeah.
It's right. You'll be sorry, better safe than sorry, or like, well, be careful what you wish for.
Right.
You just might get it.
Yeah.
Well, we should be so lucky. Yeah, it's just conservative mindset at the end of the day.
All right, we got
fear of change because the assumption is that the right would win.
Right.
Any political battle, which is just I think it's just a subconscious acknowledgement, a psychological level. It's like they know that we're just a corporate political system where popular will has no place or power, and they know this, and so their participation and complicity is like the best. Like it's a way of assuaging the guilt, like not the guilt, but the powerlessness of it. Just to pretend that you're participating, or to participate even though you're not participating in a government that's yours, but by participating, you have purpose in it.
Right.
It's obviously very sad.
It's kind of like putting up the play steering wheel in the car for the toddler to pretend like they're driving.
Yeah, I guess that could be a workable metaphor.
All right. Well, I think we're going to have to leave the video there tonight.
Anyone going to the DNC certainly feels like, yes, I am part of this great, wonderful democracy.
Part of the process. Can actually make some change. You know, some of the best things in the world, in the history of the government, came up out of caucuses and
the change is that I'm here.
Yeah, right? Yeah. No. I feel
it's history because I'm part of it. So I'm going to Chicago next week.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear all about
by next week I mean Thursday, but whatever.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'll tell you all about it the following week, I suppose. Unfortunately, it looks like the transit card, you have to physically get the physical card. You can't just pay for fares using like the app.
Oh, really?
Which is strange because my regional transport network in my small city,
right?
Like I can use my phone to tap my fare.
Yeah, how is Chicago?
But the Chicago app, I can connect it to the card to put money on the card, but I still have to have the physical card. So it looks like, worst case scenario, I have to get that $5 card.
Yeah.
Because I waited too long before looking this up, because I just assumed that the Chicago app would have the same functionality as my fucking podunk, CTA app, which was literally just put together like 5 years ago.
Sure.
And because like you could get it for free, or the $5 is put into your fares, but I would have to have ordered it a week ago.
Oh, jeez.
Because you have to physically get it mailed to me or register on the phone. So maybe I could try it tomorrow.
That's crazy.
And call up their system but it's like, well, I'm not going to get it in time.
Yeah.
And I only plan on taking the train maybe a few times. So
sure.
I put $10 on I put $10 in the app which has no card attached to it. So I guess I need to spend that other $5 to use the $10 I put in.
That's annoying.
Thankfully I only put in $10, but
that's crazy. I mean, even our rinky-dink little mass transit system in the Twin Cities, you can buy fares on your phone, and then you can show a driver or an MTA official if need be. You can say, "Yep, yeah, I got my purchase."
Well, I don't know if they can deduct it, but I can certainly show them I have $10 in my account.
Yeah. But no, you actually activate the
Ventra app.
Mm-hmm. That's
here,
surprising. They have such a better system.
You're not gonna see it. You're not gonna see it well on my camera, but like you can see that.
Yeah. $10 in the account. Mm-hmm.
But this add CTA pays fare doesn't do shit. So,
wow.
But apparently the Mentra tickets, which is the regional rail, does have that function. It's just the overhead trains and the buses. So I've heard, I got an inkling that the Chicago transit system isn't what people might think it is.
Really?
That it is actually pretty limited and sucky.
Really?
Well, they haven't added any new trains, and they've struggled to do so. Because in the 80s, they cut, like, unlike New York, I mean, New York has had a steady decline, but Chicago had very sharp decline.
Precipitous, huh?
Like, in the 80s, their ridership dropped, like, by a third, so thus that just cut the floor out of anything.
It shows the stupidity of tying mass transit to fares. Like, do you want a good system, or do you want to be on the whims of what people are willing to pay at the time?
Well, the MTA in New York, they supplemented, they replaced fare dependence on debt dependence. And the debt is held by Wall Street bonds. So
lovely.
The financial markets. So they've squeezed the transit system dry. And it's why that's underbuilt. And why it looks like total shit, and actually is starting to run like total shit.
Yeah.
It's in fact getting worse than when I went there.
That's a shame.
All right, so good tidings to you.
Have a safe trip. I hope you do lots of cool stuff.
It is by train. Everyone seems to be surprised when I mention that.
It's one of the best ways to travel, I gotta say. Much better than airfare. Taking a plane, that sucks. So yeah.
Yeah, I never want to take the plane.
Avoid at all costs.
Alrighty.
All right.
Good night, man.
Yep.
Until next time.
See you then.
Keep the faith.
I shall do my best.
That's Frederick Gray's tagline. Sorry. Cult tip season. There we go.
All right. Well, that was Dan Platt of the Albany Leftists. And that's going to put another episode in the books. It is past my time, so I'm going to sign off as well. Thanks to all that joined. We did have a new follower on Twitch, which I didn't mention earlier. Let's see if I can pull you up quick just so I can name check you. Let's scroll back. Here we go. Why is it not saying? It's just saying thanks for the follow. Latinist. Thanks for the follow. Hope you enjoyed the show. Beaker. I saw that you commented. I tried to comment back. Hope you enjoyed the show as well. And I hope to see you all next time. Next time will be Sunday. Most likely. Yeah, almost certainly. We got grad school starting up again. So it's going to be very busy. But plan on Sunday being the next time we get together. Do more Tears of the Kingdom. And then we'll see what we do for Tuesday's show. Probably be me and Amanda doing whatever we feel like. So look forward to that. And I will see you all next time.